Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. It is your host, Cesar Espino, and today I have a special guest. He is a songwriter, musician, author, father of four, expat, and survivor of childhood cancer and adult depression. Having spent his entire life saturated both in music and writing, his band CK Baker Bands has released their sophomore album, Find Your Way. His gift as a songwriter comes alive as an alternative rock sound, compelling combination of styles from classic rock, rhyme and blues, folk and soul, by melding hook-filled melody within unexpected chord changes. His lyrics and vocal delivery showcase his ability and willingness to be completely honest in bearing his emotional soul to the listener. He's also the author of Songs for Ivy, a love story and hope and resilience, inspired by his personal tragedies and childhood cancer and having his leg amputated above the knee at the age of 14. This fictional novel is a touching and enlightening perspective on the complexity of the human soul and experience. It's my pleasure to introduce you, Carlos Baker. Hey, Carlos.
Oh, thank you, Cecil. There's some tongue twisters in there for you, man.
Yeah, quite a few, definitely.
I feel like that thing can double as an obituary, like found dead in his Hollywood apartment.
Yeah, no, definitely you've gone through a lot, and so why don't you tell us by telling us a little bit more about your background and where you're originally from and how's your upbringing?
Sure, man. Well, I kind of had like a storybook ideal childhood. My father married my mom, who's from Bolivia, South America. She came over here when she was 18. My dad's like a white dude. And when I was born, my pops built a $30,000 raised ranch on the 20-acre farm that my grandfather had bought, which was just outside of Providence, Rhode Island. And we had all the stuff that kids would want, man. We had all the toys and all the animals and motorcycles and three-wheelers, and a wonderful childhood with a lot of family, a lot of cousins around. And then when I was 12 years old, kind of fast forward, I kept complaining to my father and mother about kind of having bad circulation in my left foot. Like my foot kept going to sleep like pins and needles.
Mm-hmm.
And so my dad finally, after we can remember probably 6 months before me complaining, we finally went to a walk-in clinic in East Providence, Rhode Island, as if it was nothing, just another day. And the doctor was like, yeah, it looks a little swollen. We'll take an x-ray. And then when he came back into the room with what we thought was some simple diagnosis, mm-hmm. You could even as a 12-year-old, I could feel the energy in the room. Like he was like, yeah, there's something going on in there. And I'm going to send you over to a colleague of mine, today. We're going to send you over to a colleague at the Rhode Island hospital. And from there, they knew immediately that it was osteosarcoma, which is a bone cancer that hits kids, usually kids around that age. And so began my journey, man. Began the last day of a normal kind of childhood, and then kind of transitioning into fighting for. I mean, I make it sound so dramatic. It changed into just trying to figure out how to survive. For me, it was just, I was still under my parents' kind of thumb. So in retrospect, when I look back, it was so tough on my parents, right? I have four kids. You have
Mm.
kids?
And I do. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have one.
So, like even if your kid has a cold, you're like, oh, my baby.
You're right.
Well,
Yeah.
my parents kind of thought I was going to die for, 2 years. And I feel like my community, my mom, my dad, my brother, my family, they took the brunt of it. To be honest, it sounds illogical but and kind of not intuitively, you'd think it was terrible for me. It wasn't a terribly, like, I don't have terrible memories of it. And whether that be just the way I was born, kind of a positive dude, I remember it's just, well, okay, well, more surgery, more chemotherapy, more, um, so, but it was, there were pretty crazy times, man. It went from one surgery to the next. And I always tell this story that I remember when I was like 18. So I had, just, we'll go back and we'll circle
Mhm.
back. But when I was like 18, I was really close to my grandmother, and I had read some book about or we had learned a little bit about the depression. So I asked my grandmother, I said, do you remember that stuff? What was the worst thing that you had happen to you in your life? And she
Mhm.
was like, well, you. And I thought she was joking. I'm like, ha, no, really. And she's like, no, when you got sick, that was the worst thing that ever happened to, me and the family. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
it took it took me 5 years to finally be like, oh, what I went through affected, it wasn't just me, it affected everybody. Because, you know, it spread to both my lungs. My chances of survival were 0%. And for whatever reason, I came out the other side. And yeah, you to this day, I wonder why I was the one. I had all the guys and girls that I went through at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston. They had different types of cancer, Ewing sarcoma and,
Mhm.
leukemia, and so many of them died, man. One day, gone the next. And I didn't, and at the time I didn't question it, because I was just like, yeah, it didn't even dawn on me that I could die. I wasn't one of those kids where I was like, am I going to live? I was like, oh, fuck, more stuff. Okay,
Yeah.
whatever. But again, as I got older and started understanding, yeah, everyone assumed I was going to die because I was so sick. But
Yeah. I
yeah, I
mean,
got through it, man.
yeah, and even definitely just thinking about it, being 12 years, going to 14 years, and just being a kid and being able to be okay with that. Again, not a lot of people can take that, right? And so definitely there was a lot of lessons, as you mentioned, you have 4 kids. So now looking back right now, what are some of those big lessons that you can take away from that? Because as you mentioned, there's the reason why you're here, and now you obviously have done a lot of stuff with your music and writing songs and becoming an author. There's definitely things and a purpose that now you're serving, except being the fact that you saw like, it is what it is. I'm just gonna deal with it. Have there been any major lessons from that you can kind of go back and say, you know what, I get it now. This is exactly what I was meant to learn from
Yeah,
that experience.
yeah. I mean, listen, I don't have any, when people come to me now, and
Hmm.
that if someone's going through cancer or something, they're like, how did you do it? And the answer for me is super easy. It was pure naivety. I think I
Hmm.
was one of those humans that, and to be honest with you, to this day, I think I live that way. Is I just feel like things are going to work out. Like, I just, I was never one of those guys that was questioning. And not that I'm not intelligent. I mean, I'm relatively,
Hmm.
a relatively normally intelligent guy. I just was so naive, and I don't know, it for some reason, how can it, when I look back, how can it be that it didn't dawn on me at any point that, oh, there's a chance that I'm not going to make it? But again, and as far as lessons, I don't think it was anything extremely intentional as far as
Hmm.
lessons, but I do feel like intuitively, and I say this with tremendous respect for the world, is I'm a good dude. Like, I'm not a bad guy. I live a good life, and I love my children. I love my wife. We've been together for 32 years, and I love interacting and connecting with people like you. I don't know what else there is for me to do other than, continue on. I listen to the universe. I let it tell me where I'm going next. And, but it's, I'm not a particularly religious guy. So I think, as much as work as I've done to figure out who and why I am who I
Yeah.
am, I don't know that I have any answers. You know what I mean? If you got any, let me know. But
No, right, right. No,
right.
I get you, and obviously the fact that you're a very positive guy. I mean, that'll, I always tell people really that comes down to the way you were brought up, and also the people, your parents. Many of those different elements play a very important role to that, right? Because oftentimes people whine and complain about the simplest things, and they have this negative connotation about life or circumstances, and then they wonder, or they're thinking, why is this happening to me? And again, already going into that negative connotation, right?
Yeah, it's funny because I haven't worked, I'm a musician. I've lived specifically for the last 14 years as a kind of an artist, raising my 4 children, so a stay-at-home father. And just for the last 3 months, for the first time in 14 years, I'm working a traditional job. So I'm coming to work every day at a chocolate factory here in Chicago, Illinois. And I, to be honest, I had forgotten how nice it is
How
to,
that felt.
yeah,
Yeah.
to interact with there's probably right now 100 Guatemalan, Mexican, San Salvadorian, Venezuelan people kind of out in the assembly area.
Yeah.
And I speak Spanish, so I've created this awesome relationship with all this group of people that I really would not have otherwise interacted with. And the upper management in this business, they don't speak Spanish. So
Mm.
it's I think and I'm an investor in this business. So when I'm back there working with them, there's this I'm playing this role of, they know I'm not like one of them.
Hmm.
They also can't imagine that I'm an owner, because my name is Carlos and I'm
Yeah.
brown skinned. I get the sense that they're like, well, you can't be with the white guys.
Yeah.
But so I found this amazing role of, these people are so excited to kind of communicate with me and share their kind of joys and speculations of this business that they worked in for years. So, and then on the other end, in the front office where there's about 30 of us, I guess I just forgot about how beautiful it is to, kind of have those little connections every morning,
Right.
like, what's up? Good morning. Did you sleep good? Like, I love that stuff.
Yeah.
So to me, small talk is, it may be a very American thing, to be honest with you, because I know we lived in Germany for 14 years, and Germans don't like small talk, man. You know what I mean? Like, they're
Yeah.
all business, man. They're like, we got shit to do.
Yeah.
Ain't no time to talk about that stuff.
Right, right, right. No, I get it, and you know what? I even, it's funny you mentioned that. I was talking to somebody, uh, somebody that I used to do business with in the past, and he has an office at his current place, and I said, hey, how about you rent me that office, because I also work from home, right? And it's nice again to be able to go to a place, or sometimes
Yeah.
up with other people, because I also miss that. It's good to be able to get out and be just on your own, I guess. So.
Yeah. And I would imagine, again, with COVID, and so that the whole world kind of moving to these, home offices, that, and that had to have affected the world. It just not being motivated to be at a certain place every morning and have your coffee and have your routine. That's kind of weird.
Right. And talking about COVID, and actually that leads to my next question, is what it did to a lot of people, because even during my podcast, I was interviewing a lot of people that were faced with a lot of isolation, and part of that also depression, right? So let's talk about, for you, you also went through a phase of adult depression. Tell me a little bit about that, and how did that come about, and what you did to kind of get out of that.
Yeah, man. It was, geez, I kind of glazed it through. I finished high school as a healthy young dude, learned to walk. They cut my leg off when I was 14. I learned to walk. I, moved on and pretended like I was a regular dude, which,
Mhm.
in many ways I was. In other ways I definitely had challenges, but it was what it was. And I went to college and lived a very for lack of a better term, a kind of a free-spirited type life where I had just regular jobs. I finished with a business degree, but I didn't go in to start a career. I was kind of working at a gym or a coffee shop, and then I decided to get married, and we had a bunch of kids, and I went to work for the family, and we bought a house, and we did all the things that adults do, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, I don't know that I was ready to be serious. Uh, and that's the only word I can use, because I do feel like all of us at some point, we have to stop being a kid and just be a little bit more serious, right?
Right.
And there was a bunch of years where I worked hard. I was putting a lot of hours in for the family, and I would come home and I was enjoying my kids and my wife. But at some point, it just overwhelmed me, and my brain was no longer able to kind of, I guess, cope with, first of all, from a creative standpoint, I always played music. I was always writing, I always had a notebook, and, I've always loved that kind of stuff. And when we started having kids, I just physically put my musical instruments in the basement, and I said out loud, the time for music is over. Now I got to be a father. Now I got to be serious, And yeah, all of a sudden I guess I would have been about 33, and my brain essentially shut down. I mean, I had my first panic attack. I was in Boston. I was with one of my best buds, and I knew something wasn't feeling right. The tips of my fingers were tingly, and the toes on my right foot were tingly, and I knew something was happening. And then all of a sudden, boom, I just got hammered with my first experience of what a panic attack is. And I know depression comes, shows its faces in many ways.
Right.
For me, that whatever it was, that 3 seconds, 5, 10 seconds, I don't know how long a panic attacks, but it forever changed, my life. That experience, that fear, it was crushing. And and my way of dealing with it was to shut the world out, not tell anyone. The only people I kind of kept in my life was my 3 kids and my wife. And I just pushed everyone away because I just didn't know how to handle it.
Right.
I was so afraid of another panic. This fear of having another panic attack caused me such, anguish. And I lived like that for 2 years, where I just pushed all my buddies away, pushed my family, my mom, my dad, and everyone knew something was wrong, but they kind of blamed it on my wife. It was just awful. And, really, to the point where I was at the end, I was no longer wanted to be on this earth. I was just not able to function, and was so angry. And these little things that I always loved to do, which was just connect with people, buying a coffee, just what we're talking about, normal human. I just had totally lost that ability.
Yeah.
And and what happened, the way my eyes were opened was I somehow ran into one of my best friends who also worked for my family. I loved him. I grew up with him. He was by my side when I was sick. I had no reason to not trust him, but I was no longer able to connect with him because I was sick, in my head. So I ran into him, and I said, "What's going down, man?" And he knew I was not doing well, but he's like, how much I love working at your family's business, and the people are they're the greatest people in the world, but I'm thinking of, starting a new career. So it was like a real short conversation. And then when I got in my car, I literally put my head back on the headrest, and I'm like, okay, my best friend in the world, who doesn't have any reason, he's not out to get me. He just told me that he loves working at the family business. And I used to love working at the family business. Like, it was like the light bulb went off, where I was like, something's broken in me. It can't be all of them. They don't hate me, because in my mind, everyone was out to get me, type thing.
Yeah.
Whatever, the insane depression stuff.
Yeah.
And it was really literally that day I called my mom, and I said, I'm heading to, in Rhode Island, there's a big mental health institute. And I said, I'm going to go physically drive there right now. Can you make some calls and see if you can get someone to see me? And and I physically walked into that place, and saw the psychiatrist, brought me right in. an older guy. And I told him my story. I said, I haven't driven in a car with anyone other than my wife and my three kids for
Mhm.
for 2 years. I've pushed everyone away. He's like, okay, well, so yeah, you have depression. I'm going to give you some pills and you'll feel better tomorrow. And I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's how silly the situation was. That's how sick I was. And he was right. I took a Klonopin or Xanax, and my mind was, slowed down for the first time in 2 years, and and I was able to at least kind of take a breath and be like, holy shit, what the just happened? Like,
Mhm.
what just occurred for the last 2 years? And I got on the right meds long term, and kind of at least got to a neutral. And at that point, my wife and myself and the three kids, we packed up our entire world and we decided to move to the little village she was born and raised in northern Germany.
Got you.
She knew I needed a change. She intuitively knew that, for me to get better, I needed to just go somewhere. And she was ready for change. So off we went. What I wasn't prepared for, because I was kind of neutral, I was starting to get back to normal life and interact with people, and it felt good to be alive again type thing. But then I had to deal with kind of this, like, what just happened, which for me, the emotion was really shame, right?
Mhm.
Shame of failing. So I think it might be a man thing. I don't want to be sexist. I think with men, we're supposed to be strong. We're supposed
Right.
to be
Yeah.
the breadwinner. We're supposed to be the, stand by our families. And so I was like, ooh, I failed. And in my mind, because I think I'm, special or something, again, maybe we all do, is I felt like I had failed in grand fashion. The
Mm.
truth is that's not true at all.
Right.
No one was watching, no one cared. In retrospect, of course, you're like, yeah, nobody gives a shit. All people want is that, if you're a good person, the community that you live in wants you to be happy. That's that's just how life is.
Right.
But when your brain is broken, you're thinking, oh, everyone's laughing at me. It's not true, right? It's but I had to deal with all that stuff, and that shame that took me years to kind of work through and make sense and come to terms with, hey, I wasn't meant to be a business guy. My wife in Germany, my wife went back to work full time. I started raising the kids. We had another baby, so I got to raise an infant,
Hmm.
and I had the greatest, it was the greatest experience of my life. I would have never dreamed that I would have done it, that I would have got that opportunity to bring the kids to school and be the primary kind of caregiver and cooking and shopping. But
Yeah.
it made sense for me, and I'm a
It
really
worked out.
loving dude, so I
Yeah.
gave a bunch of love to my kids, and the rest is the rest is history. It kind of is that easy. It was like I put myself in a position where I could be successful and help and raise my children, and the depression, it's there, man. It's always there. I'm always aware of it, and I know that it can, I know that it could pop up at any moment, and I'm still on the same meds that I've been for 15 years. But I'm not afraid of it because I know how to deal with it. If it
Right.
happens,
And
right?
that's
If
the difference, right? Now you
Yeah,
know and you can deal with it, and you're aware of it more than anything, right?
I get it, man. I get it.
Yeah.
If my brain goes on overload, I get like, oh shit, all right, I got to deal with this.
Right.
I got to step into it. Lean in. It's kind of that, I know in business they use that, like, management, when you're dealing with one of your employees, you got to lean in,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
with if you're dealing with your boss.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I've learned to do as an adult is I just try and lean in, and I'm sure you agree, is those dark days maybe were the greatest days of my life, man. That's where I learned, that's where I figured it all out.
Yeah.
I
For sure.
I saw the rock bottom. I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not a drug addict, but I saw my rock bottom, man. And I was ready to go. I would have been I would have been happy if a bus ran me over at some point,
Yeah.
but I'm also incredibly appreciative that I'm still here, and damn, I love my kids, and I'm a lucky dude, man.
Yeah. Well, and to that, I always tell people that sometimes from pain, a purpose is born. And really, when you're in those down moments, or when you're going through some challenging times, or the idea of you're failing at something, really those are the biggest breakthroughs that you can have, when you can recognize, and you're able to be able to see it for what it is, understand, extract the lessons or whatever you had to learn from that. Those are some of the best moments, right? You grow and gain more off of those moments than just being at this playing field of just learning, right?
And you know
There's
what
nothing
bums
going
me
on.
out, Caesar? I totally agree with what you're saying. I'll tell you what bums me out is I
Mhm.
know people in my life that are super successful. For me, and that's not necessarily true, but because I grew up in a family of money and business,
Mhm.
for me, successful, I'm quoting here, is money, is financial, right? If you make a lot of money, you're successful. That's not true. But what bums me out is people that are successful, but we all have failures, man. Like even successful guys they've tried other businesses, or they've it's just part of life, man. And the people that I run into that I know for a fact have had failures but wouldn't dare bring them up. It's such a bummer to me, because it's like, dude, we get that you've made it. We get that you're a millionaire, or we get that you've got fancy stuff. Like, but I think I'd appreciate it even more if you were more willing to embrace your failures, talk about them, talk about how you learned from them. And I'm really kind of talking about one person in my life that I know he had failures, but Lord knows God forbid you bring them up. Like, that's not, they get erased. And that's a bummer, because you do, like you said, you lose an opportunity to learn, right?
Right. Yeah, and again, I agree with you, and I've seen that a lot too from a lot of people, that they only show that one side of the coin, right? And I believe, especially for me being in this type of business, being an entrepreneur, one of the things that I try to do when I'm speaking or creating content is I want to be able to show people both sides, the down moments, and the moments that I'm going through some challenging times, because it's not always nice and shiny. There's a lot of different moments that that we're facing. We're human beings, except
And it
again, a lot of
creates
people.
context, right? It
Mhm.
it, it kind of creates context for your wins, but it also shows kind of some humble, like, being humble is part of who we are, right? You should be able to step back and be like, yeah, man, of course I've made mistakes, that, but I got, whatever, what do they say? I got up by the bootstraps or whatever,
Yep.
you know, and that humbleness, when it lacks in those guys that are super successful, again, I do feel like they lose a chance to be human, man, because um I I am 100% more comfortable talking about my failures and my challenges than I am talking about the fact that I had a few, to me, I started and finished writing a book. Is it a great book? Am I the next John Grissom? No. But that is for me a big win. I finished
Mhm.
something,
Right.
but I'm not the type of guy to go and tell people about it. I feel more comfortable to talk about, this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't know why that is. It's just feels to me more comfortable to say, to talk about my challenges, and then kind of in the end say, but hey, man, I'm still here, and I'm still a good dude, and I'm still a happy guy, and I get more out of that than I do patting myself on the back. But I guess we're
Yeah.
all different, right?
Right. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. So let me take you back a little bit. At what point did you had the passion of becoming a musician, writing songs? So how did that come about for you?
The music, the writing songs was always, so writing tunes was always part of my life. I just had never kind of, throughout my kind of young early 20s, and I was always writing, and they weren't always songs, but it was often stuff that could be turned into songs. um when we moved to Germany, I very much started playing. I brought my upright bass, you call it here. I brought my upright bass and my electric bass with me to Germany when we moved, and as soon as we kind of arrived, I started playing, and I'm a pretty good player, so I found a little community there that took me in. And the combination of playing music again and having a lot of dark stuff needing to get it out was a perfect kind of like the perfect storm, because I found myself, needing to these ideas and these things wanted to come, it felt very intuitive that they wanted to come out. So the songwriting was just a super organic, and I wasn't trying to become I was in my late 30s at that point in my life. I wasn't trying to become a famous musician, or I was just enjoying this, like, oh, there's songs that are kind of, they want to show themselves, and I was capturing them. And to this day, nothing makes me more happy when I'm able to capture a tune and they're still dark, man. Even though I feel like I'm comfortable in where I'm at in life, for some reason I like to talk about a lot of my stuff talks about depression, and I always think of depression as a kind of an entity, like a monster, a physical thing that's coming after me. As far as writing the book, I raised my kids, was really tight with my daughters. They're now 21 and 20. And when they were in their mid-teens, it was Christmas of 2016. We got them a bunch of young adult books. I've always been a big reader, and they also are big readers. And I can remember reading the back of these young adult books that we bought for them. And I was like, I think I could write a book. Like, it's like one of those light bulbs. I was like, I think I could do this. I know, I've just watched my daughters grow up, and I literally, January 1, I had a little shitty computer, and I said, I'm going to try and write a book. And the only thing I knew is that the main character will be my daughter's age, and I'll see if I can pull it off. And I worked every single day. I know you're a book writer. I don't know what your process was, but every single day without fail, I had my computer with me. And if it was 10 minutes or 2 hours, I opened the computer and I let it flow. I didn't have any plan. I didn't have an outline. I didn't plan the characters, and I know a couple of years later, when I engaged a real developmental editor, so not a line editor, someone to look at the project as a big picture. She was like, all right, one of her first questions was like, what was your process when you started? I'm like, huh? It's like, no. I just let it flow every day, man. And ultimately, some really interesting characters came alive. One in particular, ultimately, the gist of the book is the main character is a 16-year-old boy who's is at the end of his battle with cancer. He's about to die from the same cancer that I had, lost his leg. So very similar experiences that I remember, except that he was not going to make it. And he decided to leave a journal to his then 1-year-old sister as a way for her to get to know him. So that's kind of the core. That was the core character. And this 16-year and to leave the journal to her when she turns 16 on her 16th birthday. So that's kind of where the book starts, right? Yep. And as a result of that, it was so cool because I had to dig into stuff that maybe I had never even bothered to think about. So I had to try and remember the sounds and the smells and the emotions that I felt when the doctors came in with good or bad news, and the nurses, and I tell you, Cesar, as a result of that, I know for a fact there was a handful of things that I was able to kind of find that I had just never remembered. I had never thought about it, never talked about it again. And I think that's why I think everyone should write a book. I think there's tremendous value when you can dig deep and you can pull out whether it be good or usually the more negative stuff. If you could pull it out and kind of wrestle with it, you know what I mean? There's value there, man. I think that's basically what therapy is, right? You spend $100 an hour for therapy. I did it I just did it. And, I've told this story before, but I use this example of, I know for a fact I had never talked about it again, but when they amputated my leg, so I was 14 years old, 14 and a half, they amputated to the middle of my thigh. I have 19 centimeters of femur bone. And when I woke up from the surgery, they had to put a cast, like if you break your arm, they'd physically put a cast on what was left, the stump of my leg. so that it controls the swelling.
Mm.
So 3 days, I think, let's just say 2-3 days go by. It actually wasn't as painful as other surgeries I had had. So maybe I was on more meds than normal, but my doctor, just me and my doctor, his name was Dr. Mark Gebhardt. He takes me into a room and he says, all right, I got to take the cast off. Got to take a look at the scar. And I'm like, okay. So he uses one of those machines, cut the casts off, and he takes the cast off, and there I am, 14-and-a-half-year-old dude looking at my gnarly stump of a leg, like that's, and I honestly don't think I had ever thought of that. And he was like, well, Carlos, it looks pretty good. And I'm like, Doc, I'm not sure I agree with you. Like, so even as a 14-and-a-half, there was levity there. Like I made a joke, and I think I had tears in my eyes, if I remember correctly. But again, I think to find that memory and just to close up the memory is, I remember he was like, all right, this is going to hurt. So, he did whatever he needed to do. He said, this is going to hurt. So, be ready. And he basically rolled on like a compression sock, again, to keep the swelling down. And I remember I saw stars, just fucking saw stars. I had never felt so much pain, but it's something he needed to do. And so, that's a great example of the therapeutic value for me of writing the book. I told my mom about it, after I wrote, and she's like, yeah, I wasn't in the room, but I remember that day. And so,
no, and that's a good point. I've helped over, maybe now, I don't even know, last count, over 100 people become authors, and I helped them with that journey. And one of the things that the common theme that I get from a lot of people is that it was a time of discovery, right? They discovered things that they couldn't probably see without them writing, and actually, as you said, just get into that. It was that very soothing, self-soothing and self-healing in many aspects for many people. And so I see it, and I do believe that, you gotta, it doesn't matter what. I always tell people, don't worry about writing a crappy book, right? At the end of the day, write something, just write it down, because that's going to help you in many different ways, and you just don't know in which way it's going to help you. Everybody's different, except, again, I have seen it time after time that people said, you know what, this made a big difference and has helped me in certain areas in my life to either be more confident, to either get something out, to share something, whatever that might be, right? And it always, at the end of the day, it's always something more positive, and or it's adding to their life at the end, right? Which is huge.
Yeah, I mean, shit, we all need accomplishments. I mean, that is, and if
that's the other thing too, self-accomplishment is huge, I think.
Dude, I remember when I remember when, it organically came to an end. The one of the main characters died. It was perfect, without a plan. It organically came to an end. And I remember that would have been like, I think it was 18 months later. I think it took me about 18 months. And I remember just being like I don't know if I'm going to end up editing this. I don't know if I'm going to put it out to the world, but man, I just started something and finished it. Shit, that's huge. And that is huge. And ultimately, the reality is, basically friends and family has read it, but that doesn't matter to me. That's not really what it's about. It's I have it in my hands. I do feel it's the same way with my music. It's, you don't really need to make CDs anymore. No one has CD players, right?
Right.
But this last album I just made last year, I had like 250 CDs printed, because I was like, I want to hold the CD in my hands, man.
Hey, yeah.
Like that's like a ritual for my generation. That's how we did it. And so as a result, I have 249 CDs if anyone needs one.
Nice. I'm probably getting one. So let's talk about the title, Find Your Way. I think that's huge. How did that come about? Is there any meaning behind that title, and why you decided to go with that?
There definitely is. Everything I've done creatively in the last decade with music, it tends to be quite dark, and even Songs for Ivy to some degree is quite dark. And I know the first album I put out, which we kind of made during COVID, and it's called Walk Alone, and to me, Walk Alone signified kind of, you, in the end, we all have to do the work, right? I think we can I can still turn to my mom at 50 years old. I can ask for help from my wife, but in the end, for me, ain't no one going to help me fix what was going on in my brain. I had to do it myself. I had to do that work, and to do that, you got to walk alone, man. And that's it's beautiful and all that, but it is quite dark. I think with this other album, with the newer album, I worked with a wonderful producer, and we kind of had all the here in Chicago. His name is Brian Deck, and during the process, I'd already brought him all a bunch of tunes, about 20 songs, and from those we chose. But during the process, I was quite creative, and my best bud here in Chicago, one of his friend's daughters ended up with, she was diagnosed with the same cancer I had, just by chance, osteosarcoma, was going through the same stuff. And every once in a while, I would ask my buddy, hey, did you hear how's she doing? And she's having a hard time, or, she's getting chemotherapy. And I kept making the offer to, if not meet with her, because maybe that's a little intimidating as a dude with one leg, with an artificial leg. I offered to speak with the parents, right? Because I'm a parent myself. And
yeah,
they weren't ready for it, which was fine. And my buddy Jay, in passing, said, you should write a song for her. And I was like, well, it doesn't really work that way for me. I don't write songs. They have to just kind of happen, but you never know, right?
yep.
And evidently she had said, he had said a few quotes that the father had said, that she's, she misses playing with her friends. And I didn't think anything of it, but for me, this is the beauty of the creative process. That night, the night that he said that to me, this song just appeared, boom, like nothing, but it was from the father's point of view. It was, because that's where I'm at in life, right? I'm not thinking for myself anymore. I'm thinking from the father's point of view. And the story behind the song is, it's the father saying, hey, baby, I would do anything. I would give my life for you. I'd take your place without thinking about it. But you're going to get through this, and you're going to find your way, because I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to be by your side. And the song showed itself, and I brought it. It was so great because I brought it in the next day we were in pre-production process at this point. And the producer was so, he's rather intimidating, and kind of, he's like old school. So he's like one of those guys, like, this is shit. I'm like, come on, man. Like, that's my baby. But, with this song, he was like, you wrote this last night? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, okay, yeah, this is going to be on the album. And I'm like, yeah. And because so much of my stuff is dark, to name it Find Your Way, I just felt was so nice. It was like, it said so much about where I'm at in life, is that I'm still, not only am I still fighting, but I'm finding it. I'm making it happen. And it meant the world to me, man. I'm super proud of the album. Again, not because I'm the next Bob Dylan, just because I'm really proud of the album, and had a wonderful time making it here in Chicago.
No, that's good. And at the end, you have something to leave behind for your kids too, right? At least for me, when I did my first book, it's like, I want to leave something behind for my daughter and my grandkids. And, that's really the for me, that was a huge, right, to be able to do that. So,
yeah. And they're my only fans. Let's face it. They're the only ones that my 12-year-old actually knows all my lyrics. I'm like, that's the best, bud.
Yeah, that's awesome. Carlos, where can people find out more, maybe, about the stuff that you have going on right now? Connect with you if they wanted to connect with you.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. CK Baker Band is the Instagram, and Carlos Baker is my Facebook name. But yeah, you can find me, and I'm always willing to, especially if there's anyone going through those hard times, I'm always willing to give my time in any way I can help.
Yeah, definitely. I have one question for you, and definitely I think you can bring some value to this. People that are watching this or listening to this, if they're going through any challenge, whatever that challenge that might be, what could be one advice you can give them so they can start overcoming that challenge?
Yeah, I say we go back to what you and I talked about earlier. Is just lean in, man.
Yeah.
You can't be afraid. I mean, we're all afraid. I think most humans are afraid 99% of the time, but the time when you're facing those challenges, that's the time that you got to just lean in, and you got it. We all got that. We all got a gear to take it to the next level. It's just a matter of trying to find it, right?
Yeah.
Find your way, man. Oh, I just brought it all back, dude.
Find your
I'm
way.
brilliant.
There you go. Yeah, you did. You did. Awesome. Carlos, thank you again for being here. Really appreciate our conversation. Any last words before I let you go?
No, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and I wish you the best, man.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And for the rest of you guys, do me a favor. Please make sure that you subscribe, like this podcast, and share it with somebody because somebody needs to hear this message. I'll see you guys in the next episode of this podcast show. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you've tuned into this podcast. You can find me at your favorite podcast platform where you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. And to learn more about myself, my services, you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com, or you can also find me at your social media. Thanks for joining me, and I am looking forward to having you at the next episode. And know you truly can overcome anything.